Well, we got to give the Chevette its first rundown this past weekend, and it had some good times, it had some bad times. It was working pretty good for most of the day, and then the timing belt tensioner came loose, and we spun the timing belt. By the time I pulled it back into the pits and started doing some investigating, I found a broken rocker arm. So leads me to believe I've got some bent valves. It's running now, but it's not running very good. So we're going to dive into it and see what kind of damage we're dealing with.
Generally, after a part failure, you always have mixed feelings about the prior race. But this time was different. With the current pandemic causing a late start to the season, it was just a relief to get back to the track and see some friends you haven't seen in months. With our location gradually improving, we were able to spend the whole weekend out as a family and see some longtime friends. The Chevette performed well for the most part, and aside from when I decided to take a detour through the infield, we were in the mix for every race. Though we didn't get to finish the entire weekend, it was a fantastic Father's Day weekend spent with friends and family around a bunch of great people doing what they love. Capped off by an amazing battle between two young brothers racing for a win and spending his first weekend in the race car, the younger of the two held off his older brother for his first win. Couldn't really ask for much more. And after hauling an overloaded 30-year-old trailer with a 35-year-old race car behind an overloaded 40-year-old motorhome with a failing starter, just getting home was a relief. And now the process of replacing a head in a race car and a starter on the motorhome begins, so we can do it all over again in 2 weeks.
Well, that's what we got. We got valve marks on every piston. Doesn't appear to be any serious damage to the pistons, which is a good thing. Let's see what the head looks like. The cylinder head doesn't look too worse for wear. I mean, I'd have to pull each valve out and double check, but an initial thought, doesn't look terrible. What I've got here is just kind of a depth gauge. I'm just double checking to make sure that potentially none of the rods were bent when the piston made contact with the valve. So I've got this gauge set. So when it tops out its stroke, we're right at 0. And as long as every cylinder does the same thing, I'm pretty comfortable that the rods are going to be okay. I am pretty comfortable the rods are going to be okay regardless, but better to be safe than sorry. So all the pistons were within 2 thou, so I'm pretty confident they're going to be okay. Next step is the cylinder head. So this is the one that was on the car. I'm pretty certain the exhaust valves at the bare minimum are all going to be bent. They haven't been holding fluid. Well, 2 of them haven't been holding fluid. 2 of them have really slowly been leaking fluid. This is a cylinder head off of the first engine that was in the Chevette. And I think I'm just going to go with this one. I know there's no damage to this one. I'm just going to give it a quick valve lap, and then we're going to throw this one in there as it is. These are really similar cylinder heads, so it shouldn't change things too much. We'll see what happens. Finally done. That took the better part of 3 evenings. I don't normally get a lot of time to get in here. It's early, not early, but it's Saturday morning now, a week after I blew it, and I just finished lapping the last valve. But just like before, I gave it 4 passes on each valve. I got 4 different grits of cutting compound here. So we'll put it all back together. We'll see if it holds fluid. If I'm happy with it, we'll be able to throw it back in the engine. Got a little frustrated. I went into an auto parts store to find this oil pressure sensor. I wanted a normally closed switch so it opens when there's oil pressure and my light turns off on the dashboard. So that's what I asked for. And they asked for the application. And I said, it doesn't matter, I just need a normally closed oil pressure sending switch. And they said without an application, they couldn't find it for me. I was a little disappointed, to say the least. So I did my due diligence and I found one online, and I had to buy one online instead of buying one in the store, which they probably had in stock. But it is what it is. Now I should have a proper oil pressure light. So the next step I need to do is I'm going to be changing cams this time around. This cam was in the first engine that I built. It's a little bit more in the lower end torque range. I figured I'll give it a try. Why not? This past weekend on the smaller track, I was having a hard time coming out of the corner. It wouldn't really light up until about halfway down the straightaway. On the bigger tracks, that's not too much of a problem, but also with my new tires and the bigger tires, I don't need to rev it all the way up to the rev limit. So this might be the one I need. This carrier is super dirty just because it's been sitting in my shop uncovered for a couple of years. So I think I'm just going to take the cam out, and I think I'm just going to put it in the other carrier that's clean and go from there. What I'm trying to do here, this is just a stock cam pulley, factory cam pulley. It's aligned by this little nub right here. What you're supposed to do in a stock application is you put the pulley on, and then there's a little hole here, and you use a rod or an Allen key, and it'll line up with a hole behind in this cam cover. That's how you know at top dead center, that's where you set your pulley, boom, it'll fire up every time. What I'm trying to do is get an eyeball of where that's supposed to go. On the aftermarket pulley, this adjustable one, it doesn't have a mark to go top dead center. So it looks like our little dowel is just a tiny bit off center. So I'm just gonna have to eyeball that. Then we'll put it, when we put it in the engine, we'll cycle it by hand to make sure there's no interference. Then we can start it up, then we can dial it in. When we were at the track trying to do this after the timing belt slipped and I was trying to get it back running again, I always carried a factory pulley with me in case we needed to for whatever reason. And we put it all in like this and we lined it all up. Then I forgot to take the Allen key out when we started it, and it's now a permanent part of this cam pulley. So we usually, when you're in a rush, working in the dark and the dirt at a racetrack, that's the kind of stuff that happens. All you can do is laugh, didn't do any damage, fortunately. In all honesty, the old head gasket, if I didn't have a new one just happened to be lying around still, I would have just reused it. It was still in usable shape. Might be a little sloppy, but I'm gonna save that one in case of an emergency. In my longing to enjoy what summer we do get around here, I like to work with the door open as much as possible. And it just happens to be poplar shedding season, and this is all the poplar fuzz that blew in the door when I had it open. That's a bright, shining moment there. Nothing like a little extra work before putting it back together. It should degree in is supposed to be 102 degree center line, same as the other one. So we'll stick it in there or mess around with it and see what happens. Just tightening it up now. Cam is degreed. That was a lot of work. A lot of little finicky business, but it's done. It's tight. I'm going to mark it for future reference at top dead center, the location of the cam pulley, and then I'm calling it a night. I was hoping to have this thing back together, but that took way too long. It's tricky to do in the car. Might have been quicker to pull the whole engine out, time it, put it back in. I think I got everything all back together. I'm going to fire it up, make sure it runs and doesn't make any weird noises before I finalize everything like the alternator belts and fill it up with water and everything. We'll see what happens. There you have it, back together. Sounds good, started well. Should be good to go. A couple small things to button up for the weekend. It's Sunday today, and our first points race is this coming weekend, Saturday at Castro Raceway. So I'm gonna swap the big tires on it, probably got an oil change later in the week, and a nut and bolt, and we're ready to go. So hopefully we have a little bit better fate. I'll be double checking some extra nuts and bolts like belt tensioners, maybe even revising belt tensioners over the week. We'll see. So anyways, thanks for sticking through this one. Catch you next time. Cheers.